Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Christopher Ludwig here, Editor-in-Chief at Automotive Logistics and Ultima Media, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest edition of the Livestream Hour, coming at you live from the far reaches outside the European Single Market and Customs Union, where we're going to be talking about, of course, Brexit and the impact that it's had on the that it's having on the automotive industry, and what we can expect in terms of changes going ahead, and looking at ways that we can optimize customs and planning to optimize the supply chain, also in other regions as well. I'm going to be joined by some excellent guests, both from Volvo and GEFCO. We're going to go through some of the really practical implications that we're seeing as a result of Brexit, and what companies need to do to plan, and likewise the tools and systems to consider in that. So just to introduce you a little bit more to what we're going to be talking about today, and firstly, just to thank our partner for this live stream episode, GEFCO. GEFCO, of course, is a major third-party logistics provider for whom trade with the UK and Europe is obviously bread and butter, part of the key services that they offer. And if you want some more specific information on Brexit, there's also a link that we showed here, and I think we're going to pop that into the chat as well. So just you know, there's more. We're going to go through a lot of details today as well, but I think there's even more resource and detail for you there. And in your handout section of the control panel, which you can find on your right-hand side, there's a handout section. You can download further some of the resources which are there as well. So do be sure to check those out. Just to let you know, I think just if I frame the session a little bit today, life is different in the supply chain post Brexit, and perhaps not just. I should mention, not just for the automotive supply chain. Anybody who's currently dealing with the retail side, food industry, will have plenty to tell you. It probably won't be too much of our focus today, but clearly life is different. What are some of the changes? Of course, we're going to go through this in a bit more detail. We do have an agreement. There's an FTA in place, signed just in time at the end of last year, which allows for no tariffs and quotas on goods, but does, as we'll go into, require many new, much more paperwork and processes, some of which can have material impact for logistics and supply chain decisions, depending on your operations. Among the many changes, import and export custom declarations, some new requirements around permits and export licenses, and other kind of authorization requirements. Parts origin thresholds have been established and set. In some cases, certificates of origin are needed. This will have some implications for how automotive trade works as well. It requires understanding of changing custom codes, Incoterms, VAT. Some of this will be de rigueur for many companies who are trading globally, of course, but it will be new for those specifically trading on EU and UK terms for which many of these considerations were pretty seamless. We'll get on to this, but I think the risk that it could add to current disruption that we're seeing from COVID, capacity constraints in logistics, and indeed supply shortages. When we talk about chip shortages and semiconductors, which are plaguing industry right now, can this add to that? I think it can, but we'll talk about that a little bit more with our guests shortly. Perhaps worth noting that some OEMs have indeed already slowed or stopped production as a result. What we want to talk about today as well is in the context of Brexit, but well beyond as well. How can we optimize customs cost in our logistics planning? How can we use trade compliance, or look at trade compliance changes, customs rules, and not just be reacting on the back foot, but integrate this as part of the decisions we make, be it on supply, logistics, or production in future. I will be joined shortly by two expert guests in these areas, Morten Steen Jensen, who's head of global customs and exports for Volvo Cars, and Olivier Thouard, the customs and fiscal representation at GEFCO. We'll spend a bit of time with each of them on picking what the Brexit deal and some of the trade complexities we see means for their companies and their clients in those cases, and then we'll obviously bring both together for discussion and perhaps most important for me, answer your questions. So please put through questions, comments, challenges that you're facing or that you see or anticipate in Brexit or other aspects of trade, and let's bring it to our panel for some discussion. Before we move a little bit deeper into this, just a little reminder for all of you that the Livestream Hour is part of our ongoing series of digital events and broadcasts. And in a couple of weeks' time, we have a major virtual event happening with our North America Live Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain North America Live Conference, February 2nd to 3rd. More details for that on the site. I do hope you'll join us. We've got some great speakers already lined up. Lots of topics to cover. Brexit won't be one of them in this case, but trade, compliance, changing rules and regulations certainly will when we look across the landscape in North America as well. And obviously, as a virtual event, we really hope all of you will have the opportunity to join and be part of this. So there's a link as well in the chat for you to consider. Before I bring on our first guest, I want to take a quick poll just to get a sense from the audience how some of the, how prepared you were for Brexit so far. So it's got a question I'm going to be putting through. Sorry, 1 second. We should launch that poll now. The question is sort of simple right now. If you can answer any of these, how prepared was your supply chain and operations to manage the changes that followed Brexit on December 31st? So that is the UK actually leaving the single market and customs union. Would you say you were highly prepared? Would you say you were somewhat prepared? Would you say you were somewhat unprepared? Or would you say you were highly unprepared, or indeed that your overall operations were unprepared? So we can just, we can see most of you flowing in and voting right now. Pretty interesting results as I can see right now. Of course, the deal wasn't agreed until the last minute, but we did know a lot of changes were coming, indeed, around leaving single market and customs union. So majority of you have now voted. Thank you for that. It's great to see the participation. And it's going to be a little more decisive than I think the Brexit poll it was itself. But I'm glad to report that I would say the overwhelming majority of people were prepared, be it somewhat prepared, in which 49%, more than a third of you highly prepared, and only a small amount of you actually unprepared. So I think that's obviously quite good news, just to kind of get a sense of where we were ahead of this and what we're facing. Just one more question for now before we go in with our experts. Let's get a little bit of a measure of how you think it's impacting your logistics and supply chain performance so far. So what impact is the UK leaving the single market and customs union having on your logistics and supply chain performance? Is it highly negative? Is it somewhat negative? Is it a neutral to minimal effect? Or is it somewhat or even highly positive? If you can give us a vote and let us know, we'll get a little bit of sense. So, and I can tell you already that being prepared didn't necessarily seem to make this so super positive for everyone. So I'm gonna just give it another second to close. Thanks again. We've got a great majority of people voting already. Thanks for participating. I'll go ahead and close that poll and give you the result, which is a little bit the reverse of what we just kind of had. Big majority have seen somewhat negative effects so far. It's only a small amount highly negative, but if you add those together, we're obviously looking at near enough 80% with a negative impact, the balance being mainly neutral, and only a few positive right now. I'm not trying to make that a partisan answer or a partisan question right now. I mean, clearly we can discuss there's likely to be other positives that could come in future. Whether we've seen them in 2 weeks or can already see them now is obviously probably more complicated. But thanks for that. I think that gave us already quite a good picture of what we're starting to see, and that frames us up well to kick off our discussion with our experts. We'll have a bit more polls to come as well. I'm really pleased to welcome and introduce our first guest of the day, Morten Steen Jensen, who's head of global customs and exports for Volvo Cars. Morten is leading the division for customs and export at Volvo. I believe it's a fairly new division and role. We'll talk about that briefly. So Morten, if you can join us, I believe you'll be joining us over from Gothenburg. We've got some questions. There you are, Morten. Great to see you.
Yes, good to see you too.
Fantastic.
Yes, I'm in Gothenburg in the office.
Great stuff. Yeah, and as we said before, we can see that it's pretty quiet back there. I'm sure that everybody, like many parts of us right now, are working remotely. So good to see there's some distance happening there. Morten, I wanted to start a little bit with actually your role and your function, just to give us a little bit of grounding, a sense of what that function is that you're leading. Because as we talked about a couple of months ago, with Volvo Cars, I believe the customs function has been relatively recently insourced and is being developed as a more strategic function within supply chain logistics. Can you just tell us a little bit about that to start?
True. If we go back to where I started back in 2013, there was no customs function at all in Volvo Cars, and it was 100% outsourced. So in connection with taking control over our logistics, it was decided to take control over customs as well. And we spent a couple of years probably doing like most in-house customs functions, being happy, making sure that we actually got our imports and our exports in place. But recently we've decided that while that is good and that is our bread and butter, it would probably also make more sense if we try to move ourselves in a slightly different perspective within the company. Duties in the automotive world is generally high, and duties therefore also impact profitability to a very large extent. So we've decided, and we are trying to at the moment, move ourselves upstream and get customs into decision making and a lot earlier time than after the fact, so to say. We talk a lot about, we design for profitability, we design for manufacturing, we design for logistics, but for me it's also a question of why don't we design for customs? Because it doesn't really matter if we build a cheaper car in the factory, if it in the end means that we can't live up to a free trade agreement, or if we have to pay a lot of extra duties. So that's what we are trying to bring to the company right now. That is a bit of a journey, but I think we've started to getting traction on that.
So it's interesting when you talk about wanting to design for customs. I suppose that the implication of that is that it hasn't necessarily happened quite like that up to now. What would you say are kind of examples of how it looks when you don't do it, or how it looks when you do, right? So how can you be better? What would the benefits of that be compared to now?
I mean, like I just said, if you make decisions only based on what is the cheapest car getting out of the factory, then you end up with a car that may be cheap to build or cheaper to build. But if you're then selling it to a market where you're paying a significant higher duty than you could possibly have been doing, you actually end up damaging your profitability where you thought you were improving it. And I think the reason that sometimes happens is that there is a fundamental lack of customs understanding in most companies. It's customs, and maybe many of the people that is watching here will recognize this. Customs has a tendency to be clustered with logistics, and logistics is a cost, and it's a cost that just needs to reduce, and we don't really think a lot about it. And I think it's really important that we get customs and we move it up and make it visible. Because if we look at other taxes, it's a tax on a profit if there is one, whereas customs is actually a duty that needs to be paid, regardless if we're making any money on our cars. So it's really important to move it up, that make sure that we make duties visible and make visible what we actually can do to mitigate duty costs within the laws, of course.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's an excellent kind of basis for us to start on. Let's turn a little bit to the matter at hand, right? So, or at least the question of the day around Brexit. Just kind of specifically, what are some of the key impacts, shifts, changes you're seeing or have seen so far, or anticipate seeing, let's say, in the immediate term here, as a result of Brexit? Now, I should just back up for one second here. I think it's obvious to most of our audience, but just to be clear, obviously Volvo Cars obviously doesn't produce cars in the UK, but does clearly import them, does clearly import service parts and other things like that. So obviously our perspective here might not be the same as everyone, but very interested to hear what you're seeing so far.
I mean, I think with Brexit, we've been fortunate that we've had a couple of dress rehearsals. We've been very close a couple of times, so we've had a chance to practice, which I think has helped us being really ready. And I've said, when people have been asking me, I've generally gone around and said, well, this is business as usual, at least when it comes from a customs perspective. If we were importing from 50 countries, we would now be importing from 51 countries. If we've been exporting to 100 countries, we're now exporting to 101. It's not really that big of a deal. That being said, the fact that, and you pointed that out, that the agreement came on the 24th of December, that's a very short time to address whatever is in that agreement and getting ready. And there are teething problems. There are things that we need to deal with, of course. But I mean, overall, I think I agree with the result of the poll, that we were prepared, and the impact is minor negative. It's teething problems. So I really don't think that it's such a big deal. I may get into trouble saying that, but I really don't think so.
Well, we have it on record now, Morten, so we can check with you, of course, in a couple of months. But I think, we won't we won't go line by line by, like, what sort of some of the technical shifts and changes are required. Clearly, there's, as I outlined at the beginning, there are customs declarations, different kinds of paperwork and bureaucracy that's certainly required. I'm going to touch on some of those impacts as GEFCO sees them in a little bit with Olivier. But I just, again, from a Volvo point of view, do you think, as you just highlighted, it's minor adjustments, so you don't necessarily see any material impacts on, for example, the shipping routes, distribution, storage, for example, impacts? Do you have to make any adjustments or potentially make adjustments to things like that?
I think it's a little early maybe to say exactly what's going to happen, but I don't think that any changes has been made so far. Obviously, Chinese and US built cars bound for the UK, we've stopped import clearing them to the EU. That will be a pure waste of money, and they will be shipped directly to the UK rather than to Belgium as previously. But apart from that, I don't think there has been a lot of changes planned. I think we've been pretty prepared, and our supply chain is robust to deal also in the new situation.
So you beat me there to what I wanted to say. So I would, clearly, as you established, when cars, because I'm understanding previously a car imported from China would have come in and been consolidated, I think, in Belgium and then shipped out. Obviously, that there's adjustments like that which need to shift to the UK.
Of course, and I mean the UK is now earning some duty pounds on those cars rather than the EU. So there's that at least.
There we go. So we did have 3% of somewhat positive. Maybe there's at least something to pull out. Do you think, looking, and again, this may be Brexit or this may be beyond, some advice for, be it your peers or your suppliers or companies you're working with, to kind of get ahead of what further changes are? So what are some things we can be doing now to prepare for further changes in trade and on the customs side?
I mean, if we're thinking Brexit and the situation right now, I think it's really a matter of keeping your eyes peeled and keeping an eye on the guidance coming out, both from HMRC and from the various EU customs. And then I would say generally keep talking to each other, pick up the phone, send a Skype message, whatever is needed. Because generally, as the recipient, in many cases where things go wrong, the most frustrating thing is when you don't hear there's a problem brewing. So yeah, no, keep your eyes closed, not closed, but open, and keep trying to predict what's going to happen in the next couple of days. And I think, and then I'm sure Olivier has a lot of horror stories already, but I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to see things stabilizing, and we're going to realize what it is that we need to do. But we just need to get through these couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Well, Morten, that was a good kind of kickoff intro. We're going to bring you back in 10, 15 minutes or so after we spend a little bit of time with Olivier, so that you can answer some audience questions, and we can talk a bit more broadly about a few other strategies on customs and export control. But thanks for that insight, and I think thanks also for the calming insight, I think, there as well, showing us it's obviously not all doom and gloom just yet. We'll see if Olivier has a different perspective, but thanks, Morten. We'll see you in just a little while. And again, a reminder to our audience to send through any questions, and Morten will address them shortly. So our next guest is Olivier Thouard, as I said in the beginning, Customs and Fiscal Representation Director for GEFCO, and I think it's fair to call Olivier a real Brexit expert. He's certainly playing a key role at GEFCO in terms of working across the divisions to implement changes and understand that. He's been on quite a few relevant committees and task force relative to Brexit as well. So really glad to have you with us, Olivier, to talk through some of this. Now, we heard Morten's perspective. As I kind of gave some context for our audience, for those who may be less familiar, I think it's fair to say that moving trade across the EU and UK, well, now these borders is really big business for GEFCO, important business for GEFCO, big volumes. But I really want to start with you, Olivier. Can you give us a view at the border kind of right now, if you like, what's happening today, 2 weeks in to Brexit or post single market? Obviously, other things going on. Give us a little glimpse of what's going on and what we might need to understand and prepare for from there.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. Good afternoon, all. We are more than 1 week after the beginning of Brexit, and now it. To be honest, it's difficult. So we discovered the border the first days. If I come back to the first days, but in fact, the first days was okay because it was about goods crossing under Article 47 of the Withdrawal Agreement, which means that it was EU goods crossing the border without any export or import declarations. But then that's finished, and now we move to the standard process, which means export declarations and import declarations and transit sometimes. And then it's a little more difficult because everything has been built for this Brexit, and everything is not working as it should. For sure, some of the buildings are still not finished on UK side. We discovered some issues also on French side, and we had some issues linked to loadings for the containers with some ferry companies. So yeah, we have a few issues. We still have some. We also have a lot of problems to manage with the transit documents, specifically from UK to Europe. Because even if we are using and issuing some transit across the border, a lot of them are not activated when crossing, before or when crossing anyway, and we are now facing issues also at destination. So, I mean, it's not, I would say it's difficult. We had a first EU call from CLICAT, which is our logistic association. Last week, it was already very difficult, and specifically for sure for Irish. But the next call will be tomorrow, and I'm sure. I mean, it's even worse than last week. Huh?
Well, indeed. Well, so as you're there, we get a sense of a picture sort of scarily, slowly worsening in some ways. So things obviously we hopefully can address there. Olivier, and again, I think we don't want to go into, we don't want to get lost in all the detail here, because otherwise we would probably spend the rest of the discussion just on filling out a customs form. But can you give us, as short as possible, kind of key processes, changes, things to consider in shipping from the UK to EU and sort of back, and just give us a little bit of sense of how that's changed, and then from there let's think about what we need to do to optimize the process.
Yeah, exactly. So I will start with from EU to UK. Huh? From EU to UK, as I said, you need an export declaration. This is the first thing, which is new, but you need an export declaration. And then you need a preloge to preloge something to cross the border. It may be one of the British options. It can be one of the British options, which are crossing with a T1, but then you need to go somewhere in the UK to discharge your T1. Or to preloge an import declaration, which can be using an easement with crossing with the GB area number of the importer, and then to have a few months to declare the goods came in, or using simplified frontier declarations or full frontier declarations. But they all have to be done before the crossing. That is what is new, and it is different from all other borders. So this is from and after when it's done on UK side, I would say it's finished. On the other side, from UK to EU, you need still an export declaration, and then you need something to cross the border. It may be a transit issued in the northern ports from Belgium or Netherlands, but it can also be a transit issued for the French side, from the French border, but then you cannot issue it on French side. You need to issue it before you cross, which is also really new. And it's so it's crossing with transit, UK transit, which is the standard, I would say, is very difficult, as I said, because we still don't exactly understand why, but a lot of them are not activated. And so the trucks can be stopped at the border or later on. But anyway, after your export, your transit, and then you need an import clearance on EU side. I mean, this is the basics at destination, but you need an office of destination in the importing country.
Do you think, I mean, obviously you've given us a sense of some of the challenges faced right now with these sort of new processes, and along with it, do you think that there is the risk of quite a significant enough delay and changes that we need to change some logistics processes in the automotive industry, or as car makers will have to consider whether it's new storage locations or warehousing or new routes, etc.?
So for sure, we will have to change processes, but we learn. This is a new border. We are learning, trying to understand why we have sometimes some issues, and also it's important to understand that the border operating model was published in July, first time, then second version in October, and then we are now going to a third version. So, I mean, even the rules were not clear at the end of the year. On French side, it is the same. They published something like 30 rules in December. I mean, 30 new guidance. Nobody had time to read them. So it's so for sure we will have to adapt. For sure we will have to change our processes. But today, honestly, we are really focusing on daily business to make sure it will go smoothly.
Do you think there's as a major logistics operator, obviously you need to understand the rules, but communicate, of course, I think back to authorities as well, so that hopefully they understand what the implications of these rules are or aren't. I mean, do you think the communication mechanisms also with the customs authorities are sufficient right now to feed back and hopefully make sure that the improvements happen?
Now, if you speak about the customs of origin, the country of origin and the origin of goods, it's very important to know that, yeah, in the free trade agreements, when they publish it, they said there is no quota, no duties. Yeah, for sure, but it depends, in fact. So to benefit from this agreement, it means on the invoice we need to declare the origin. It can be the easiest way is to manage what they call a statement on origin, and it's written in the agreement. But then it means it's easier on the UK side because UK traders just have to add a specific wording which is in the agreement in one of the appendix, saying that and using their GB area number to define who they are, saying that it is GB goods origin. On the EU side, it's a little more complex because to be able to use the agreement, exporters needs to be registered, which is a European registration for exporters. And the system was closed up to the 6th of January because they needed to update it to make sure we won't have any GB in it. So they did the update, now it's open again. So all traders should ask for it. And once they will have it, then they will need to they will be able to add the statement on origin on the invoices to allow the importers at destination not to pay duties. But they will then have 1 year to fulfill completely the rules and to ask for the long-term declarations and everything linked to that.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So obviously, yeah, the origin rules there complicated, doesn't help when the systems are closed down or need to be updated. But hopefully we can start to work through those. On things like customs codes, Incoterms, etc. You know, these are now obviously important things to keep in mind for EU-UK trade. Are you seeing any challenges on this side, or areas where companies are having some challenges there too?
I would say customs codes. I think most companies are aware about customs codes, so no big issues about that. At least for automotive industry, yeah. Because yeah, hopefully we are not speaking about SPS goods, sanitary goods and food. It's another subject. But no, I mean there is no questions about commodity codes, I would say. But for sure, even if we said for many weeks, months, and years that Incoterms were very, very important, in fact. We're still discovering, and we discovered a lot of non-compliant invoices. People stopped at the border because they couldn't issue an export or an import declaration linked to the Incoterm. So yeah, we also had to manage that, and also people not prepared because they thought the Incoterm was something else, and they thought they shouldn't have to do anything. So yeah, we are still facing that. Huh? It's going to be solved, but it's still a big issue.
Absolutely. So before we bring Morten back and go to some audience questions, Olivier, one more question, just specific from our side. Do you see IT systems digitalization that the GEFCO perhaps is working on? I mean, clearly there's the customs systems from the governments, but in terms of your own systems and technologies, do you think this will play a really important role in improving some of these processes, smoothing some of the challenges that we're seeing so far?
So yes, for sure it will, but it will take time, to be honest, because IT, you don't change the IT in 2 days. Huh? So when the rules are moving, we also have what I even said in the process, when the driver and the carrier will cross the border from UK to EU. Now they also have to issue an ENS, a safety security declaration. Right? It's also mandatory, and also to use, in case of transit, to use a GVMS, which is a British system to declare that the transit is crossing. So a lot of things to do. And speaking about IT systems from authorities, what I can say also is that we faced big issues this weekend because it seems that French customs faced a cyber attack between Saturday evening up to Sunday evening. And so for sure, it cannot help. So everything was down except the border, because hopefully the border management is not directly linked to the French IT custom system. But it means no customs clearance were performed between Saturday and Sunday. It's not working days, but so it was not so big issues, but it's still we still need to make sure everything will work.
Okay, so again, a bit of clearly lots of things still to work out there. Obviously, you said it's going to take time as we work through these changes. I want to bring Morten back into the conversation so that we can unpick some of the issues together, and also look a little bit beyond Brexit too, as we look at some other trade and customs things as well. So Morten, when you're ready, if you can join us again. Welcome back. So, you know, one of the things that I thought would be interesting, you mentioned, you know, for a certain extent, Volvo, there is a bit of business as usual here, because it's another third-party country, if you like, kind of to deal with in trade. I thought it's maybe worth a quick understanding of maybe how this compares or doesn't compare with even other countries you're trading with right within Europe. I mean, in Sweden, you have a neighbor, for example, in Norway, who is actually, not a member of the customs union, or we have Switzerland, obviously, in Europe, which also has different rules. So, I mean, would you say this is very on a par to these different? How would you sort of compare and contrast?
It's roughly the same, isn't it? The main difference probably is that Norway and Switzerland has been doing this for a long time, and this is the UK getting used to. And I mean, Volvo Cars in the UK hasn't imported a car since 1973, so this is of course a new day, and there's a lot of getting used to doing new stuff, but. I mean, the UK customs and the UK government has put in place a lot of grace and has tried to make this very easy on UK business. So it's not on the UK side I see that there would be anything, maybe with the possible exception of Northern Ireland, because there's a somewhat confusion in Northern Ireland on what is actually applicable. But when it comes to the EU side of things, it's an export, it's or an import from our suppliers in the UK. It's I mean, it may be provocative after what Olivier was just saying, but it is business as usual. It looks like any other import. Sure, we've been through the last couple of weeks with documentation that shipments had started before New Year's, etc. But I mean, that's the things that you go through in a change like this. So I do think that it looks very much like what we have already. It's more work, obviously, but it's work that looks like and is similar in workload to the rest of the world.
Yeah, indeed, and I think to Olivier's point as well, it's new too, right? So it is, and where there's it may not be that the work in and of itself is so complicated, but obviously all of these things together on top, and then as volumes are growing and there's other challenges too, I'm sure that's where some of our difficulties may lie. And in fact, I want to turn to one of the audience, or there's a couple of great audience questions in, so I'm going to turn to a few of them, and one of them is with taking the example of some other disruption we're seeing, for example, Honda raising concerns related to the supply chain, related to microchips and semiconductors, and we've seen some impacts there. And there's just a sense, not specific to Honda, but whether either of the panelists have concerns that there might be other disruptions in the EU, UK supply chain as we kind of go further here. So are you anticipating or worried about kind of further disruptions coming down as a result of this? Do you want to start with that, Olivier?
I mean, you mean more disruption than what we have today, linked to the start of Brexit? I mean, no, I think we are in the middle of the start. Huh? So, no, for sure, all processes, we are learning. I know when I speak about the carriers, I followed a few trucks that have issues. In fact, we are learning how the system is working now. The carriers are understanding now what they should do, where they should go, if they have a transit. If the transit is not issued in an agreed location, they have to go to an agreed British official place, like Ashford, for example, where they should get the transit activated. So they are learning, and also at the border, if they don't do the right thing, they should be stopped. But today, it's not fully the case. So yeah, we are learning. No, I mean, the big issues are now. And I hope it will be behind us very quickly. Anyway, we are working on this. But also the volumes are coming back. So we started with very low volumes, and they will come back for during the next weeks. So it's also what we need to focus on.
Okay, great. I don't know, Morten, I mean, again, I think you've made it clear that the Brexit for Volvo right now is pretty business as usual. But if we, in your role, looking across kind of global customs and export controls, are there other kind of challenges on the horizon there that you'd kind of point to? I mean, we've had a rather, I would say, disruptive couple of years when it comes to different kind of tariffs and other things coming in. is the situation stabler now, or the same, or how would you characterize that?
No, it's true. I mean, if you look at if you want to look at things a little glass half full, I've been going around saying, well, the last couple of years, we've had help from strong forces around the world making customs relevant for business. So we've never been as important as we are right now. So that's a good thing. But taking it a little bit seriously, of course, it's been rough, and it's been tough to keep up on what has been going on. Looking forward, I hope I'm an incurable optimist. I hope that we can see some calming down of the situation. Wednesday next week there is a change of guard in the US, which I don't necessarily think that that's going to mean that a whole lot of things is going to be rolled back. But I think a little bit of a pause in introducing new restrictions or new disputes. So hopefully we can have a little bit of a break, and we can start resolving the issues that has been created or has surfaced over the last couple of years, because it definitely has been interesting to try and keep up.
Indeed it has. Another question here, I might put this one first to you, Olivier. The question is, do you think that export declaration documents should be linked to specific truck trailer numbers, or should the industry be looking for a better mechanism to generate the paperwork sooner or faster? So if a logistics provider sends a different trailer number to that plan, all the documentation becomes void. So I realize it's a bit of a technical question, but I thought it might be an interesting one to put to you. Do you need me to repeat it, or?
Yeah, yes, please. It's about export, right?
Yeah, so the question was from one of our audience members is, do you think that the export declaration documents should be linked to specific truck trailer numbers, or should the industry be looking at a different or better mechanism to generate the paperwork faster?
So in the export declaration, you don't need the truck plate number. If I speak about EU side, for example, you can issue an export declaration up to 90 days before. So it means you don't know the truck plate number. But sometimes, yes, you can. Sometimes some people are adding the truck plate numbers. But as soon as you want to use a transit, then you absolutely need a truck plate number. So if you are using an export and a transit linked all together, then you need your truck plate numbers. So, but it's not mandatory only for exports. So it will depend on how you cross. Are you using a transit or not? And then, if a transit, yes, you need truck plate numbers, and they will be checked.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've sort of noticed in the discussions, I think the UK government was discussing these as options, was the ideas of free ports and free trade zones, which I do think actually are allowed already in the EU, but I suppose some of the rules are maybe complicated. Do you see the free port, these sorts of free ports, as a potential positive development to come? Would there be a role to play? Again, be it in Brexit or perhaps even elsewhere in EU trade, as we see in other parts of the world. Maybe start with you there, Morten, and then we can go to Olivier.
Free ports, free zones, in my viewpoint, is not a positive development. In my role as also responsible for export controls, it would be a huge red flag for any supplier or any customer or any carrier operating through, in, out of a free zone. In 20-some years working in customs and trade compliance, I have yet to see any, at least in Europe, any good reason for using a free zone, economically at least. So no, I really don't see that as a positive development.
I like the directness and honesty of that there. Olivier, do you have a different?
No, I agree. I mean, it's not anyway. Duties have been reduced. I mean, so it was interesting in case of duties to pay on UK side. As soon as they are able to add different goods before they define the origin, and as soon as they can consider at the end that the goods are GB origin. I mean, I'm not sure they really need to have a complex system. Huh? So not sure. And if they do it on UK side, at the end we will do it more on EU side, and I'm not sure it will be easier for everybody.
Right. Okay. So so we're not kind of calling out for free ports in this live stream. That's for sure. A question from the audience, and I think it's quite an interesting one. Again, coming back on the rules of origin, this time specifically related to electrification or e-mobility products. I think that if I don't want to misquote here, but I believe that the origin rules have been set somewhat lower for the EVs right now, given the development of the supply chain there, than it has for others. In my mind, it's 55% for ICE and something like 30% currently for EV. I think it will change. The question is, do you think they allow a desired level of flexibility to the automotive industry? So any thoughts on that approach in the agreement, Olivier?
I mean, we still need to go deeply in the agreement for all kind of goods. So for sure, it's better for this. It's better to have an agreement than to have nothing. But as I said, it doesn't mean there will be no duties. And also because you need to prove the origin of goods. And sometimes you won't be able anyway to prove the origin of goods. And sometimes it won't be EU or GB origin. So I'm not sure if the origin management is something really now to focus on, as I said, and to discover. I don't know on Volvo side how you see that, but I think it could be interesting because it's I mean, it's not a career subject or a customs for sure. Customs we are managing it and we are declaring it for sure, but the origin management is more on our customer side to be analyzed and to know how they can manage it.
Sure, Morten, obviously for Volvo, with electrification is going to be is so important, increasingly so. So I mean, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, no, I mean, from Volvo side, we're of course very happy with the agreement, and yeah, as you say, the batteries got a very beneficial starting origin requirement, and that is gradually going to be tightened over 23, and then in 27 going to be significantly stricter than it's going to be right now, and similarly with the resulting vehicles. I think first of all, it reflects an interest from both the EU and the UK to attract the battery producers to these parts of the world, and then I also think that this is a really good chance for us as customs professionals to actually emphasize what it is that we really do in terms of origin, because we have an opportunity to achieve a savings on a lighter basis than it will become, and we will have the story to tell. It's already put in the books. We can see and we have that game plan to actually be able to present. So using that as a lever to basically, like I was saying before, moving customs up earlier in the decision phase, and then say, well, we need to make decisions today in terms of batteries if we want to achieve the battery origin in 23 or 27, etc. If that is the situation. So in that sense, it's a really, really good agreement from a customs perspective, that it's actually a manuscript, a shooting direction for me to go and then say, well, this is really what we need to do in order to keep the benefits that we may already be able to reap in the agreement.
So it exactly sets out that kind of early stage planning and kind of roadmap that you're so keen to see integrated into the long-term customs planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, and maybe just on that, because there's another question from the audience specifically to you, Morten, in terms of that. The question is actually to talk about your journey internally to insert customs and compliance into the early planning processes, as we've been touching on. The question from the audience was whether, for example, that might mean considering SKD or CKD for customs purposes in places, for example. I'd imagine that's just one example. I don't anticipate that that's a UK Brexit question, by the way. I think that's obviously much broader, but just if you wanted to add any more there about that journey.
I mean, SKD and CKD is, of course, one option in duty management. It's probably not my focus in itself. It's more saying when we make decisions in the company of designing a car, deciding where it's manufactured, where the components are going to be sourced, compared to where is the car really going to be sold, this is where we need to be present. And that could sometimes be, in a CKD or SKD decision. And I think you're right. I haven't heard anyone's indicating that the UK is going to implement CKD or SKD rules. But it's more about getting in before someone decides to put tooling a specific place or building a factory in the wrong place. That every information is available. And I'm designed for customs, like I said before. It's not about making customs more important than logistics or manufacturing. It's about making the information available and making sure that everybody knows that duties does play a significant role in the profitability of a car afterwards.
Excellent.
So it's about communication, I think. It's about visibility of customs. I said before, customs has a tendency to be hidden in a logistics function, and it's about up on the stage, out on your intranet, or however your communication works in whatever company you're in, and start bragging about the tremendous work that is being done in most customs departments. I mean, how many millions and millions and millions are being saved on FTAs because you meticulously collect documentation, that you do your calculation, that you do your due diligence. Get that out in front of you, tell people about it, and get the recognition that you really need, and use that as your basis to move forward.
I think it's a great point. And I asked Olivier this earlier about sort of the role that IT, digitalization, and that for GEFCO may be playing in hopefully smoothing out the Brexit process over time. As Olivier indicated, it will, but it will take time. I wonder just for you, and you're talking so much there about the importance of visibility and bringing these costs into focus and understanding it. For Volvo, is this closely linked to how you're managing this, through an SAP type system or an ERP, through other kind of systems? Can you give us a bit of a sense of what the IT landscape for customs Volvo looks like, or how it may be evolving?
For customs in Volvo Cars, we use one system globally for managing our customs, and right now we are precisely working on how do we take out that information and use it, whether we can call it big data, but use it in a proper business analytics sense, and actually start saying, well, we know what happened, we know what is going on. How do we use that to actually predict what's going to happen tomorrow or next year, or maybe even in 25 or in 2030? And taking that and making sure that we understand why our data looks that way. That is something that we're focusing very hard on right now. And being able to present data that we aren't manually manipulating, which is sort of the situation right now, to present them in a good way.
Absolutely, fantastic. Olivier, I have a few more questions here. Some of them about some specific border challenges, and we're running a little bit low on time, but let's see what we can get to, and what we don't get to, we can obviously have those questions addressed afterwards. In this case, the question was, there is a shortage of hauliers able to generate a T1 from the UK. What is the best way, in your opinion, that they can resolve this problem?
In fact, you have two. Using a T1 is not mandatory when you go through the northern ports, because you can ask an EU worker to issue it at destination. And crossing the French border, which is the biggest volumes, if you don't, if you're not able to issue a T1, British T1, then you can ask a French broker to issue a French anticipated T1. which is, to be honest, one of the options that is used today. But the issue you have issuing a transit is that it's about responsibility. And not so many brokers today are okay to issue T1s just in the middle of nowhere. And also, we discovered an IT issue on French side, which is that, you know, you probably heard about the smart border and French IT systems and everything. In fact, there is a little mistake in the middle, I would say, because everything is prepared to be done before the crossing. So if you issue a T1, a French T1, when you are still in the UK side, that's perfect. The T1 will cross, it will be confirmed as and activated during the crossing. But if then the truck has crossed, it shouldn't, the truck shouldn't cross. But if it has crossed, it's happening today, without the T1, then you will issue the French T1 in France, which should be, I would say, a normal way to do it. But then the system considers it's performed on UK side. As soon as you say it's in Calais, they consider it's in Dover. So the issue we have is that our French T1s are not activated, and it's a IT issue on customs side, and we have to call customs authorities for each of them to ask them to activate them. So it's a big mess today due to that. So sorry to go into details linked to this T1 issues, but so yeah, UK T1s, if not Belgian ones, some in the Netherlands, or French ones are still possible, but they should be performed and issued before the crossing. It's very important today.
Thank you for that. No, I think the detail is relevant and interesting for many of our audience, and perhaps just a reminder to some of the audience that there are some handouts from GEFCO with a lot of detailed information, and of course there's more follow-up, I'm sure, with Olivier and his colleagues if you need some more help on that. Again, another point before I go to my last question, but this is another kind of technical question, but I think again it's worth just bringing up since it's there. Does the declaration of origin of goods include returnable packaging items such as accessories like dunnage, returnable internal separators, etc.? If either of you have a sense of that, whether the packaging is included in the declaration of origin of goods.
I mean, yeah, you can declare. I mean, the issue we have with the packaging, I mean, it's a big subject, right? It has been discussed for many months. The issue we have with packaging is that it depends if it's EU packaging or GB packaging. And then, so the important point is to understand how it will be managed. And we have an EU regulation, and each country define its own rules after. So if I take again the French example, in France, if it's EU packaging, you can ask for a specific returnable agreement, returnable packaging, returnable agreements, which will allow you to cross with oral declaration and no imports to perform when the packaging will come back. So it is only if it's EU status. So it means, and you should have something to follow your packaging. You should have your name on it, something not to identify each of them, but you need to be able to know to identify it's yours and how you follow them. So this is for EU. For non-EU packaging, if I go on from UK to EU, then you may have to pay to import them or to use temporary imports. You have different options, but if there is no duties, it's easier to import and export than to use a temporary export. It depends how is the flow. If it's a standard flow one-to-one, it's quite easy. If not, it can come very complex very quickly, linked to the records and a lot of things. So packaging is a big issue, and also on UK side, they consider that packaging do not have to be declared. It's more that the exporters should keep records about packaging every 3 months, about what came in, what left. That's also why when you are sending packaging from the UK, sorry to be in detail again, but it's important. When you are sending packaging from the UK to the EU, you can ask to any broker. I guess they will never issue an export declaration for the packaging, but then you need a transit to cross or to go up to your final destination. And So it's something to check, because you can use a French transit, one in Belgium and Netherlands, but then you cannot use a British transit if you have no export declaration. You still need an invoice, but you still you have no British transit. Yeah, so it's packaging, and then you can decide to import them or to use temporary import export declarations. It's linked to each flow, I would say. It has to be analyzed for each flow.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think again, I appreciate the detail there. It gives us a great example of what we need to consider, all that goes into managing these flows and customs flows, etc. Again, I would refer our audience further to our experts here and further discussion on that. We're coming up to the end of the hour here, but let me just close with a question to both, and it's a little bit what we talked about earlier, Morten, when I asked a little bit, Morten, about whether how you saw the trade picture, but I want to try and look positively if we can or not. How optimistic or pessimistic are you about 2021 and beyond in terms of global free trade and facilitation? Should we still be planning for should we still expect the unexpected and expect the fragmentation and disruption as we've seen, or actually do we have some room for optimism? Let's start with you, Morten, and then we can get your view, Olivier, before we close.
Yeah, I think it's good business practice always to expect the unexpected. But like I said before, I'm an optimist. I do believe that we're going to have a period of time where the world concentrates on the COVID situation, and we have enough to do with that on all levels of society. I think I don't think anybody, unless they have to, is going to start any new disputes. And with a little bit of time, I think maybe we can, positive fingers crossed, can get to the point where some of the existing issues are being settled around the world. I really do hope so, and I do believe so.
And Olivier, we said we're in the eye of the storm right now. It's obviously tough. Probably maybe gets a bit tougher before it gets better. But what's your view? Are you still optimistic?
No, we will find a way to manage the issues. It's just a question of time, but time is running. So we're ready to face the issues. Then to find the options to manage. We still have questions and still trying to understand how it should work. From the locations like Ashford or things like that, we still need to understand why it's not working, I would say. It's more like that. But for sure, at the end, it will work. It's a question of time. The only thing is that we don't have time. So we should solve the issues right now. It's where we are today. And after it will be better, and we will then have a second step where we have to optimize, to work more into details, and but we are not on the second step yet.
As you know, time heals all wounds as long as we have the tonic of time to drink. So let's hope that we can find it as quick as possible. Olivier, Morten, thank you so much for this insight and for your time today. There's some more questions from our audience I'm going to share with you afterwards, and we can perhaps get some further answers to them. This is not the last I think we'll speak on either topic. I'm excited to follow it up with both of you and continue on this journey. But thanks to both of you for all your time. We've had some great interaction and feedback from the audience already. So just thanks so much from my side. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. And again, thanks to everyone for tuning in and for going through this. As mentioned, we have some further resources for you to download as well. Please visit our spotlight page on automotive logistics and automotive manufacturing solutions, where this live stream will be made available on demand if you want to go back and view any details, as well as our past content. And there's much of it to go back and parse through. I mentioned before our North America Supply Chain Live conference coming up in just a few weeks. Register now, get involved. We're really looking forward to that. And we have lots of happening this year too. Other live streams coming up. We'll have events focused as well for Europe coming up in April, finished vehicles coming up in June. So go on our site and there's a lot more information where that comes. We really look forward to continuing on this journey with you. Our thanks again to our partners for today's live stream, and then in fact many other things that we do, including the North America conference coming up, GEFCO, And again, as I showed before, there's a link for a bit more information. As you can tell from Olivier, there is a lot of detail and lots of help and support for where you need it. So get in touch and visit our site or GEFCO site to get some more on that. And stay in touch with us, please. Our team putting together our live streams and our events and our editorial content. You know, there's some contact details for you there. We're always interested in your ideas, learning about you know, new challenges and opportunities across the sector. So, you know, whether it's to do with Brexit or to do with anything else, we're here and ready to help. So thanks again for that. Thanks again to our panel and everyone who's joined us, and we'll see you again real soon.